The Night's King was the 13th Lord Commander of the Night's Watch and was around during the Age of Heroes not long after the Wall itself was created. The Night King is someone completely different and his true identity is yet to be revealed. Or has it? When the Night King first appeared in Game of Thrones, he was originally listed as the Night's King and had the same bio as the character from the book. It was shortly removed after the episode aired and no one really knows why. A lot of people tend to chalk it up to the fact that they are actually two different characters. There's rumors going around that the showrunners Dan and Dave and George R. R. Martin have confirmed that they're two different characters. I think we all need to look at it as more like a Blood Raven and a Three-Eyed Raven type of situation, meaning they are basically the same character with the same background and they will play the same role, but just for continuity's sake, they say they aren't the same character. This also gives them the freedom to change things about the background of the character. In this video, I want to speculate on the true origins and the true motivation behind the Night King, as well as who his new target will be in Game of Thrones Season 8, and also discuss some leaks, which are meant to be taken with a grain of salt and are more or less for entertainment purposes. But nonetheless, here's your sign and let's begin. Before we get started, please slap a like on this video as the like goal is going to be 1,420. Also, make sure you're subscribed and then, this is the most important part, make sure you have notifications turned on so that way you get alerted every single time I drop a Game of Thrones video. Do it at this long night. The Night King has been built up to be the end-all be-all in Game of Thrones. Literally, the cold opening from the very first season to the very first episode dealt with the White Walkers. We got to see not necessarily who they are, but a little bit of how they work. We get to see that they are doing some sort of ritual sacrifices north of the wall. The show really kicks off by executing the one person who can warn everybody else in the kingdoms about this, and shows us as the viewer that even though there's this crazy threat up north, there's also a bunch of politics and tradition that comes along with this story. We know that in Ned's heart, he doesn't want to execute the deserter from the Night's Watch. I think his name is Will. But we see that tradition keeps Ned Stark from doing the right thing. The show continues along for several seasons, and all the while the White Walker plot is in the back of our minds. They reveal slow details, but ultimately it just clouds the picture more than it gives us answers. It's sort of been a slow build with their story, and then it comes to a head in season 6 when we get to see the actual creation of the Night King. I think so far the stories that the showrunners have been trying to convey, the message that George will convey in his stories and his novels, will be something a little bit more different and complex. But I think what the showrunners are trying to tell us is that if the people who live in Westeros don't put aside their differences and come together, they're all going to die, and everything they've been working towards, any kind of goal that they've had set, is all going to be for nothing. And I think that right there is the main purpose of the Night King. Of course he's going to have a backstory, of course he's actually a human, and there may be a certain key to defeating him, and that's what we're going to get to see more of in season 8, but I think ultimately he served as a plot device in order to bring people who could not have any more differences together, bring them to a point of almost civility. They may lose everything in the process, but at least they would have set aside their differences and came together. Now of course my speculation could be wrong, and if you disagree with me, then let me know down below in the comment section, but I feel like there's 3 options for the ending of this amazing television show. The first option, and in my opinion the most least likely one, is that the whole story has revolved around the Night King. We've only gotten glimpses of his story so far, but he's the one who will sit the Iron Throne in the end. Loads of characters will die in the process, but the ones who survive will be given a new way to live life, and this would prove to the cyclical nature in Game of Thrones, that history repeats itself, and this has all happened before. There's been an Age of Heroes, and this is the Age of Heroes 2.0, so to speak. The second option, and this one I like the most, but I don't think it's most likely the one that's going to happen, is that the story is about the characters themselves. The Night King is used as a plot device to bring them closer, but ultimately he's dealt with by, let's say, the end of episode 3 or maybe the beginning of episode 4, and the remaining 2 episodes will focus on the great houses of Westeros. The actual Game of Thrones will have an ending, and it will be played out to a point where maybe there's a new type of government that's established. I'm a long-term fan of the idea that there will be some sort of democracy. Instead of one king or one queen, there's an elected group of officials who represent different regions in Westeros, and they all sort of come together for the greater good. And then for the third option, the one that I feel fits the most with the theme of Game of Thrones, but it's probably the one that I hate the most along with the whole story being about the Night King, is that the Night King is taken care of in the end, but that means that Jon Snow, Daenerys, the dragons, the direwolves, even Bran Stark himself all die in order to defeat the Night King. Maybe not necessarily all those characters I just listed, but a type of situation where it would be more so the meek inherit the earth. Most of the heroes who play a role in the end game don't end up making it, and the crippled, bastards, and broken things are the ones who sort of rule in the end. But you guys let me know what you think about those three options and which one's the most realistic one for Game of Thrones Season 8 and how it will end down below in the comment section. Now, before I move on to the leaks, I kind of want to make two of my points very clear about the Night King and his true identity. Now, I sort of hinted at it in the beginning of this video. I think that the Night King is actually the Night's King. He's the 13th Lord Commander, and the removal of his bio was just sort of a cover-up so that the final reveal of it in Game of Thrones Season 8, his identity will be that much bigger of a reveal. And another thing I want to clarify my thoughts on is recently Vladimir Furtick, the actor who plays the Night King, actually gave an interview in which he revealed that he has a new target in Game of Thrones Season 8. Well, wait a second, let me clarify. Not a new target, just the fact that he has a target. He mentions how that target becomes very apparent in who it is, and that he has a moment similar to the Hardhome episode with Jon Snow. Remember the scene where he raises his arm and brings all the dead back to life? He has something similar to that happen in Game of Thrones Season 8. Now, as soon as I heard that, I immediately started speculating on, is he going to warg Jon Snow? Is Jon Snow going to die and then maybe the Night King brings him back, only to realize that he can't control Jon Snow because Jon is a champion of R'hllor? Now, I don't know about that, but I do think what he more so meant was that he's going to kill someone close to Jon Snow and then bring him back right in front of him. I think the biggest consensus between the fan base about the trailer and most of the clips that we see is that it's from the first 3 episodes. So that would mean that the moment where Jon Snow and hopefully Daenerys are about to mount their 2 dragons and go flying around happens sometime after they arrive to Winterfell. A lot of people tend to think that after Jon Snow and Daenerys arrive in Winterfell in the first episode, they leave and depart in the second episode and begin doing a tour of the north to try to rally the rest of the houses who haven't joined them in the north in Winterfell. I personally like to think that they just want some alone time. Jon needs to clear his head, and this is when Daenerys offers him to go and learn how to fly a dragon. With the Great War coming, 2 dragon riders would certainly be better than 1. But getting back on track here, a lot of people think that Jon and Daenerys, for whatever reason, are not present at the beginning of the Battle of Winterfell. They show up halfway through it. And when this happens, in my opinion, this would be the perfect time for the Night King to show Jon Snow, and they have a similar moment back to Hardhome where maybe one of Jon Snow's family members has just been killed and then he gets resurrected right in front of him. What if it's Ghost? Now, another thing I want to quickly mention before I move on to the leaks, and it's something that I've sort of already talked about in a few videos ago, so I won't spend that much time on it, and that is, who is the Night King's target? If you use the context clues in the interview that Vladimir Furtick is given, he basically makes it seem as though the Night King does have some sort of backstory. We may not get to find out what it is, but there's a reason why he does the way that he does, and if he was created for a purpose and he's still enacting that purpose, then maybe his end game or his goal is to bring balance to the scales. Maybe for right now, the balance of power has been tipped in one direction, especially since Daenerys showed up with dragons, and maybe his ultimate goal is to level that playing field. His target is not necessarily one person, but multiple people, whoever possessed power. He saw the dragons and how powerful they were north of the wall, and he got one. Then Jon Snow and Daenerys basically took an embodiment of him in that white south of the wall to show Daenerys, and what's the first thing that white does is avoid everyone else and run for Cersei, because she's ultimately in that position of power. What if maybe the Night King had never really planned on going all the way down south to King's Landing until he saw Cersei? Jon Snow delivered to White to show him who Cersei is, and now he knows who sits on the Iron Throne, aka the ultimate source of power in Westeros. Am I saying that his target will be Cersei next season? It is possible, because if you want to jump into these leaks, and we're doing that, there was this massive image of what King's Landing looks like post-battle. My Queen Daenerys may have a bit of a rage side, but I don't think she would do this to King's Landing. She does want to rule it, not be Queen of the Ashes. Now on to the leaks. Now these were actually sent to me through the DMs over on Twitter. Speaking of which, make sure you go follow me at Sir_Hunts, but I want to clarify, they're meant to be taken with a grain of salt and are for purely entertainment purposes. Now this was actually one that I've briefly mentioned in one of my videos before. Check the link down below in the description to get the full detail of this, but basically there's supposed to be a flashback scene in Game of Thrones Season 8 where we see the human version of the Night King again. In this flashback, he's courting a young northern girl, and her father ends up banishing the Night King north to the wall, and on a ranging mission at some point he is captured by the Children of the Forest under the direction of the Three-Eyed Raven, and then he is turned into the first White Walker. Now what's interesting about this leak is the fact that it mentions that the relationship between the Night King and this northern girl is actually very similar between Rhaegar and Lyanna. Long story short, the Night King makes some sort of plan to go and try to escape from the Night's Watch and then go and capture the northern girl, and the two of them will go live north of the wall, but something ends up happening along the way and he's corrupted and captured by the Children of the Forest. Now in my opinion, there's like a 0.9% chance of this happening in Game of of Thrones Season 8, I feel like there's literally no time for this to happen. It would take too long to sort of explain. We'd need multiple scenes, and that would probably take place over several episodes. For the most part, I feel like if there's any sort of flashbacks in Game of Thrones Season 8, it's going to have to revolve around Jon Snow's true lineage. But that aside, I wanted to get you all who's watching this video right now, your thoughts on this leak now that we've learned this new information from Vladimir further that the Night King will have a target in Game of Thrones Season 8. Do you think this will sort of add to his backstory? And if we do get something adding to his backstory, what do you think it'll be? And since we're doing pretty well on time, another leak that I want to bring to you all's attention is one that involves the Night King dying at the Battle of Winterfell, but his death being a fake out. Viserion and Drogon will die in the battle for Winterfell, and then Jon and Daenerys travel south to deal with Cersei, only for the Night King to launch a surprise attack on King's Landing. Cersei then uses wildfire as a defense under a recommendation from Tyrion, and then most of Daenerys' army ends up getting wiped out as a result of Cersei using the wildfire. But the Night King is ultimately defeated. And this leak actually states that the trial that happens at the very end of the season is not for Tyrion, but it is instead for Cersei. Now what's interesting is around the time that we started getting all of these pictures from behind the scenes for the actual Battle of Winterfell, which is all these pictures of these corpses that are going to be used on screen to make them appear as though they're fresh dead bodies from this giant war sequence that just happened. Around that same time, there was a leak that came out that there's supposed to be some sort of fake out death next season. A lot of people thought that it could be Jaime. Some people said that the person in the scene that was being filmed looked as though it was Sansa. In the end of the episode, sort of did this panned out shot that panned past her body and all we could see was the red hair. But then the next episode starts with Sansa walking into a room, and then it's confirmed that Alice Karstark was actually the person who was killed. Now what's interesting is that you guys have pointed out in my comment section on my trailer breakdown video that the person who I thought was Sansa sitting next to Sam and Gilly in the trailer is actually Alice Karstark, with her being confirmed to hide out in the crypts of Winterfell. And we also know that she's going to be carrying guilt for what her father did and sort of betraying Jon Snow and House Stark in the north. We know she knows how to carry a sword, so it's possible that she may make some sort of last stand to save the people who are in the crypts of Winterfell. Maybe right before she engages with the White Walkers or the Whites, the camera cuts away and then it doesn't come back until we see her dead body. But you all let me know what you think about that down below in the comment section. And you know what, to be honest, I'm kind of sad about speculating on all this in-game stuff because it just made me realize we literally only have 6 hours left of the greatest television show on earth. I mean, we do have the successor shows to look forward to, but I don't think anything is going to be able to quite hit the same spot that Game of Thrones does. Alright, and with that being said, I want to thank you all so much for watching. If you could please slap a like on this video, as the like goal is going to be 1,420. Also, make sure you're subscribed, and then make sure you have notifications turned on so that way you get alerted every single time I drop a Game of Thrones video throughout this long night. Super special thank you to every single person watching this video, and a super special shout out to every single member of my Patreon family over on patreon.com/SirHuntsReviews. I want to thank you all again so much for watching. My name's Mark, and this has been Sir Hunt's Reviews.